1. Since I moved out west and the company I worked for had a hiring freeze in the week it took me to move, I ended up losing my vehicle because I couldn't make the payments. This left me using the bus for transportation. I should probably mention that I am disabled and partnered with a service dog. Some places call them assistance dogs. That I trained myself, which is legal in the United States by the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. I choose the dogs I train for their willingness to work, a very easygoing personality, and enough intelligence to be able to make some decisions on their own. One night I was coming back from the bus stop after a long day of appointments and shopping. I was completely exhausted, and I couldn't wait to just get home, feed the dog and my 2 cats, and fall into bed. I lived at the back of the property, and to get there, I had chosen to walk down the drive which looped around the outer edge of the property, as opposed to the walk on the inner walk of the apartment complex. As I approached the second entrance to the inner walk, I saw a young man not much taller than I was approach me. All I could think of was he going to ask me for cigarettes or money, neither of which I had. I tried to veer away from him, but he saw me and approached. Him. Me thinking, hurry up, my legs and feet are killing me and I want to go to bed. Spit it out so I can go home. I said shortly, what? It wasn't a question, it was a demand. Him. I was wondering if you could... His voice faded into a mumble. I just stood there. Him. I was wondering if you could give me a blowjob. Me. Thinking, well, at least this is new. I was tired, I was pissed because this guy was standing between me and my bed, and he wasn't the least put off by a large dog standing next to me. He didn't know that she wasn't allowed to engage in protective behavior, so he was either really stupid or was extremely brave. I leaned towards stupid since he wasn't exactly speaking clearly. I ran some quick scenarios in my head, all of which sounded like more energy than I had, since adrenaline was failing me. The kid looked to be 30 years younger than me, about the same age as my youngest child, so I decided to treat him like one. Me. You have about 3 seconds to get out of my way, or I'm shoving my cane so far up your ass I'll pop your eyeballs out. I flipped my cane higher in my hand to emphasize the point. Him. I took some ecstasy and it makes me horny. Me, thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, get out of my way. Me. 1, the mother's countdown. Him. What? Me. 2. Okay, looks like I'm going to have to hit him across the head, then try to hook a leg, if I don't bend my aluminium cane with the first hit. I square my shoulders. Him. He looked around. Decided I might really be a threat since I wasn't moving, and wasn't intimidated. Then took off running up the drive towards the street. I sighed with relief, took out my cell phone and called the police. I gave them a description, but about 20 minutes later, when I was crawling into bed, I got a call back from an officer saying they weren't able to find him. I told the officer what happened. She actually laughed. I'm glad someone was amused. 2. So I don't know if this identifies as a glitch in the Matrix, but it was a very strange incident. Earlier today I was at the local park with my friend, when what I assume is a mother and father and their daughter come walking towards us. And we're both too old to be hanging out at a playground when a small child is there, so we start to leave. We take about 2 steps to leave and start to feel like something is a little off. So we turn around, and they are nowhere to be seen. There's absolutely no way in the time we started walking away that they could have up and left in that short amount of time. Mind you, this is a very open park, with very little places to hide. The parking lot is about 2 football fields away, and they came in on foot, so we definitely would have seen them on their way out. And if they came in a car, we would have heard the engine. We have both lived in this neighborhood for most of our lives, and have never seen those people before. And this is a close-knit neighborhood, and pretty much everyone knows everyone. So we definitely would have known these people if they lived here. Now again, I'm not 100% sure this qualifies as a glitch in the Matrix, but it was one of the most unsettling things that has ever happened to me in my 23 years on this earth. One more thing, we both saw these people coming towards us. Maybe it could have been dismissed if one of us saw this, but we both are absolutely positive that this happened and are still not fully recovered from this. 3. I want to preface this by saying that I have experimented with hallucinogens in the past, the most powerful and significantly impactful being DMT. I've done it about 15 or 20 times. Every experience has been quite profound and eye-opening. It is known to be extremely safe and doesn't include the psychosis that can be involved with other hallucinogens, like LSD and even mushrooms. What it has done is change how my mind works, i.e., thought process and patterns, and tuned me into the universe. Now, I often have what some would call flashbacks, but in my opinion it's more like slipping into a deep meditation, which some equate to similar experiences as a DMT trip. DMT is produced in the brain during meditation. These flashbacks can begin with seeing flashes of light, hearing buzzing sounds or high-pitched ringing, feeling different vibrations and other things, similar to a migraine aura, but they aren't followed by a migraine. At first, when this would happen, I would panic a bit, and didn't know what to do with myself. Now I can recognize when it's happening and control it. And these states often lead to profound deep thoughts, ideas, and messages from the universe. I do believe our universe is very much alive, and you can communicate in full conversations with it. It has shown me things like other people's lives in vivid detail, or maybe my past lives, given me messages and advice on my own life, and many other things too much to list. Now on to my glitch. Sorry if my storytelling is a bit choppy. So let me say that I have been 100% sober from all mind-altering substances for 8 or 9 months now, and I'm not on any medications and have no mental issues. I live in a house with 5 other people in a small town, and walk into town several times a day for snacks, drinks, etc. Whatever I think I may need that day. Just a few days ago I left the house for a walk into town, of sound mind and body. Suddenly I begin to hear the ringing in my ears, the waves of vibrations and buzzing resonating up my spine, and I stopped to listen, because I thought my hearing was fading out a bit, which worried me. I stopped walking and waited. I was unsure of what I was waiting for, and I probably would have looked like a jackass standing in the middle of the street, with my eyes closed and a cigarette burning out in my hand, if there was anyone there to see me, which was odd. What was normally a busy street was deathly quiet. No cars, no people, no birds chirping, or dogs barking. I felt like I was waiting for some message of some sort. Suddenly, I heard explosions, one after another as if they were happening just 50 yards away from me. Boom! My hearing appeared to be fine. I looked all around me to find the source, then I would hear another. Boom! I kept looking for the source, feeling oddly calm about the whole thing, as if I knew it wasn't actually happening. There were maybe 6 or 7 explosion sounds. Then I got a message. Meteors. I saw a flash of a picture in my head of the fireballs raining down. But just as quickly as it all started, it ended, and everything went back to normal. The streets were bustling again, the birds were chirping, blah blah. I went and bought some smokes and a drink and went back home. I asked everyone in the house if they heard the explosion sounds, knowing damn well there's no goddamn way they could have, and none of them had heard it. Trippy. Now I'm trying to figure out, was that a message of the apocalypse? Or was it just a past event which occurred in that area? Or maybe, was it that I'm just a little bit insane? I can accept all three as plausible answers. I do consider myself a very rational person. Logic always comes first. But I do also like to take all theories into account. I believe there are many things about this universe that we do not understand, and there may or may not be a scientific explanation behind these things. I was not this way before I did DMT. I do believe that doing DMT is a bit like unplugging from the Matrix, and I often feel like I'm in that scene from the Matrix where Neo goes back and is looking around at all the people still plugged into the simulation. Everybody with their face in their screens. I want to grab them and shake them and wake them up. But it doesn't work that way. People have to wake up on their own. And they will. I know because the universe told me. And it has yet to be wrong. So anyways, that's one of my theories. Thanks for letting me share it. And if you're thinking about trying DMT, I just want to give you a fair warning. Once you unplug, you cannot plug back in. I sometimes wish I could plug myself back in. 4. This story takes place between 13 and 15 years ago, in southeastern Wisconsin. I'm sorry I can't remember the exact year, but it's not too important. I'm a 33-year-old female now. This event happened on Thanksgiving, which for those of you not familiar with American holidays, falls at the end of November. My sister and I were home from university for the long Thanksgiving weekend. My sister, whom I'll call Lynn, and myself were lounging around my parents' house after our Thanksgiving meal. Lynn is 2 years younger than I am. At the time of the story, neither of us were old enough to buy liquor, so we were both bored. At some point, we decided to take a drive to a nearby resort town, henceforth referred to as Resort Town. We were just cruising around aimlessly because 1, at least we weren't in our hometown, and 2, what else were we going to do? It was dark out. I think around 8 p.m. In the summertime, Resort Town is packed with people, and the shops and restaurants are open late to accommodate them. During the off-season, however, the town can feel empty, especially at night, when most things are closed. Being that it was a holiday, the town felt even more empty, and even more places were closed than usual. We were basically driving through a ghost town. I think I'm the one driving because my sister saw it first. Lynn is looking out the passenger side window. As we come around a curve on a fairly steep hill, at the top of the hill is a forested area, which quickly gives way to civilization. Soon we're surrounded by closed and shuttered mom-and-pop shops, and restaurants and empty parking lots. The streetlights keep the area from being completely terrifying at night. At any rate, I'm close to the bottom of the hill when Lynn says, "I think I just saw a dead body." So I really should re-emphasize that Resort Town is a small Wisconsin town. It's not immune to crime, but it's not a den of vice. Violent crime is extremely rare, and so seeing a dead or dying body isn't something one would expect. At all. "Yeah, right," I said. "No, really," Lynn insisted. She sounded serious. "Should I turn around?" I asked, because I still didn't quite believe her. "Yeah, go around the block," Lynn instructed, and so I did. Again, we come around the curve on the steep hill, and Lynn says, "It's about halfway down." Sure enough, about halfway down the hill, lying just outside of a streetlight's illuminated circle, was a body. It was lying half on the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the curb, and half off the curb, in the street. It wasn't far enough from the curb to be in danger of getting run over, though. I whipped the car into the parking lot next to the body, and Lynn and I clambered out. Another car pulled in quickly behind us. Oh good, I thought, an adult who will know what to do. Technically, Lynn and I were both adults at this point, but being in our late teens or early 20s, well, even back then I didn't really think that counted. However, another pair of sisters stepped out of this new car, and they looked even younger than Lynn and I were. "What do we do?" one of the sisters asked Lynn and me. We kind of shrugged our shoulders. There was no movement from the body. There was no groaning or moaning, not even a twitch. From where we stood, we could tell that it was an older man, dressed in at least 3 different coats and baggy pants. He looked disheveled and possibly homeless. We should call 911, one of us suggested, and Lynn wound up being the one chosen for the task. This was in the day before smartphones, and I'm pretty sure she had her Nokia when this event occurred. She punched in 911 and waited for the dispatcher to pick up. Now, before I continue, I know many of you are asking why we didn't immediately race over to the man to see if we could give him assistance in some way, and the honest truth is, I don't know. I hadn't any kind of first aid or CPR training at that point in my life, so that may have been part of it. The other part, though, was that I was in some kind of state of shock and disbelief. The situation didn't feel real. Would I do things differently if this happened to me today? You bet I would. But back then I felt useless, scared, and all I wanted was a proper adult to show up and take charge. "Hi, we found a body," I hear my sister say into the phone. There's a pause. Then she adds, "We're on Bank Street in Resort Town." Then there's a longer pause. I can see Lynn's expression changing, subtly, to one of frustration and slight anger. "Well, could you give me the right number then?" she finally says. I'm staring at her in confusion, and she shakes her head as if to say, "Don't ask right now." After a few minutes, Lynn gives a terse, "Thanks." She hangs up and punches in a new, longer number. Remember, this was in the days before smartphones, so people could remember the long sequences of digits in phone numbers. Before she hits the dial button, Lynn looks up at us and says, "The 911 operator told me that I had reached the wrong 911 call center. We're not in their jurisdiction. She told me to call the correct police department." Lynn paused to take a breath. She was going to hang up on me, but I asked her if she could give me the phone number for the correct department. Lynn rolled her eyes. "That's who I'm calling now," she finished, pushing the dial button and bringing the phone to her ear. Standing close to Lynn, I could hear the phone ringing and ringing and ringing. Finally, I heard a man speaking on the other end of the line. Lynn looks confused, then angry. "Excuse me?" she asks. I hear the guy say something again. "So this isn't the Resort Town Police Department?" I hear the guy say something. Then Lynn says, sarcastically, "Oh, that's great," she continues, "because the 911 operator for Blankety Township gave me your number as the Resort Town Police Department." The guy on the other end of the line says something, and Lynn says, "Okay, thanks," then looks at us. "So the number the 911 operator gave me was for the Blankety Blank Hotel in Blankville," Lynn tells us. "The guy at the front desk is going to get me the correct number for the Resort Town PD." Lynn gets the correct number, punches it in, and finally reaches the correct police department on their non-emergency line. After my sister explained the situation, the woman on the other end dispatched someone immediately to our location. "Why didn't you call 911? The operator wanted to know. Just as Lynn is wrapping up that story, a squad car pulls into the parking lot, and a heavy-set police officer in his mid-40s or early 50s gets out. He looks in the direction of the body, but comes over to us first. "Evening, ladies," he says. "Thank you for calling. Don't worry, I'll take care of this." The officer then proceeds to head over to the crumpled figure on the ground. He leans over him for a minute, then straightens up, and gives the body a half-hearted kick in the leg. "Kevin!" we hear him shout. "Kevin, wake up! You're scaring all of these nice people." He kicks him in the leg again, and to our surprise, the body begins to stir. We hear Kevin start groaning and mumbling a bit. When the police officer is satisfied that he's roused Kevin enough, he comes back over to where the 4 of us are huddled. "I'm so sorry, ladies," he says, sincerely apologetic. "He does this a lot. The drink, you know. Usually he makes it to the top of the hill and into the trees, but it's a bit windy tonight, so..." He trails off and gives us a shrug. "I'll take care of it from here. I'll make sure he's got someplace warm tonight," he assures us. After that, we all get back into our cars. As we pull out of the parking lot, we can see the officer yanking on Kevin's arm, trying to get him to his feet. My sister and I are quiet as we head in the direction of home, but finally, Lynn breaks the silence. I get to tell Mom and Dad when we get home. 5. This happened 2 years ago on the day of my 28th birthday. I was working at a small, double-sided, drive-through only coffee stand, about 30 minutes outside of Seattle. I'd been working there for about a year at this point, and was always scheduled to work the closing shift during the week and the opening shift on the weekends. In the 7 years I had worked as a barista at this point, I'd yet to ever experience anything like what I encountered that day, and it is my deepest hope that I am never faced with it again. It was a Thursday around 6:45 p.m. I was preparing to close the stand at 7 p.m. like usual, and it was rare that I would have many customers come through the stand past 6:30. Because of this, I was surprised when I looked up from cleaning the espresso machine to see a walk-up customer waiting at the open window, smiling at me. For safety reasons, I normally refrain from serving walk-up customers after dusk. But because the window on the side of the stand he had approached at was already open, I was kind of forced to acknowledge him. Reluctantly, I decided to serve him. He introduced himself as Ivan. He was around my age, seemed reasonably well kept in the sense his clothing and overall appearance looked pretty clean. And despite a slight accent, his English was very good. His eyes, however, were utterly unnerving. His gaze made my stomach feel uneasy. Immediately, my intuition was alerting me that something about this individual was very wrong. Every red flag possible was beginning to show in my mind, and I could not shake the deep, almost overwhelming sense of darkness that I felt coming from this person. There was an evil in him that I couldn't ignore, though I would soon find out exactly why I was feeling this way. After greeting him as politely as I could manage despite my growing hesitations, I began preparing my machine to make him a drink. However, he didn't seem to know what he wanted to order, and I asked him twice what I could get started for him, before I silently recognized the fact that he was very likely not here for the coffee. Eventually, he abandoned ordering altogether, and instead directed our interaction towards small talk. He asked me where I was from, how long I'd been working at this stand, etc. I answered each of these questions with short, abrupt answers, hoping my tone and clear lack of engagement would convey the fact that I wasn't interested in continuing any further conversation, since he was not a paying customer, and because I was about to close. After a long pause, he asks slowly, "So, do you have a boyfriend?" Annoyed, I replied curtly, "No." At this point, I was completely ready to end our interaction, so I told him that I needed to finish closing up so that I could go home. Upon hearing this, he walked away from the window he'd been standing at, mentioning in his dissent that he is looking forward to seeing me again very soon. A minute or so passes and he was out of sight. Yet, my gut told me that he was not, however, far away. I could feel his dark energy nearby, and I knew he was watching me from somewhere beyond my line of vision. Cautiously, I closed up the stand, locked the doors and windows, walked to my car and drove home. By the following day, I had all but forgotten the encounter I had with that guy, and went to work as usual. 7 p.m. rolls around once again. I am just about to end my shift and close the stand. I'm nearly finished closing out the register when a brief moment of movement catches my eye from outside the window on the opposite side of the stand. I turn my head toward the area in question, and there, in full view of both me and the security cameras, stood the guy from yesterday. My stomach sank quicker than I knew previously to be possible, and I was immediately very aware of how cold it was inside of that stand. He smiled at me with a predatory-like grin, waved, and then proceeded to pull open the closed window in front of him, instead of waiting for me to cross the small distance within the stand that stood between us and open it for him, as I usually would. and although he didn't present himself aggressively, there was something incredibly threatening about choosing to do that. It left me feeling hopelessly unsafe in that moment. And that was not a feeling I was familiar with or, as I learned, particularly fond of. Once I was finally able to bring myself back into a present state of mind again, I cleared my throat and told him as firmly as possible that I was off the clock and wouldn't be able to make anything for him, as my machine was already cleaned and my register closed out for the day. His smile widened further as he replied, "It's okay. I didn't come for the coffee. I came for you." Upon hearing this, I noticed a shift in the energy building between us. The fear I'd previously been overcome with now made a sudden and jolting transition into a redlining level of irritation. "I don't care what you came for," I told him as sternly as I could manage. "It's going to have to wait until tomorrow because I am fucking closed." At this, he chuckled a bit, before finally raising both his hands in indication of surrender, saying, all right, fair enough." His smile disappeared, his eyes became even more focused on me, his gaze intensified. "Then I will see you tomorrow," he said in a way that felt less like a statement and more like a threat. I swallowed hard, and once he was out of view, I rushed to the window and slammed it shut, throwing the lock into place. Again, despite not being able to visibly confirm his presence nearby, I knew that he was there, and I could feel his eyes fixated upon me. I left the stand quickly and got into my car to drive home. This time, however, he remained heavily on my mind for the rest of the night, robbing me entirely of any sleep at all. The following morning was a Saturday, so per my usual schedule, I got up, insanely early, to work the 5 a.m. opening shift. I arrived at the stand at 10 minutes to 5, and for the first few hours of my shift, everything was normal. 8:30 rolls around and it's now, finally, no longer freezing and dark outside, as the November mornings here tend to be. The sun had broken through the clouds and was steadily burning them off. As I was admiring the weather out the window of the stand, I noticed a familiar truck pulling up to the stand. As it neared closer, I recognized it was my ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. I found this exceptionally odd, as he and I were not currently on very friendly terms, thanks to his decision to end our relationship by sleeping with someone else while he was still living with me at the apartment I was renting at the time. Once he pulled up to the open window I was now standing at, I asked him skeptically what he was doing here. "I'm sure I'm probably not someone you were wanting to see today. I know, but I just wanted to come by and wish you a happy birthday in person and see how you were doing." Just as I was about to thank him for the birthday wishes, and inform him that no, indeed, he isn't someone I'd wanted to see that day, I was still pretty hurt from his cheating, I noticed someone about 100 yards away, approaching the stand on foot. It was Ivan. Suddenly, Jonathan's presence there at the stand with me shifted dramatically from unwanted to very, very appreciated. I whispered quickly to Jonathan that I needed him to stay here with me, even if another customer pulls in for service behind him, until the man who just walked up is gone. I could tell he was able to register the fear in my eyes, and he agreed immediately to stay. I turned to face the open window on the side of the stand, just as Ivan approached it. I walked slowly over to him and noticed right away that he'd been crying. His eyes were bloodshot and tears were still evident on his cheeks. Disregarding his obvious emotional state, I began to inform him that he needed to leave because I was not going to serve him, when he cut off my words abruptly. "I don't need this anymore. You can have it." As he said this, he threw what I later came to recognize as his Russian passport into the stand through the window. I picked it up, puzzled, and asked him why he would no longer be needing it. "I just won't." Who the hell throws their passport at someone? I thought. I looked over my shoulder at Jonathan, who now had a "what the fuck is going on" look on his face, and shrugged. I turned back to Ivan only to realize he was no longer standing in the window. I poked my head out the window to see where he'd gone, and saw him rounding the corner toward the back of the stand. I watched him walk around the stand in 3 full loops before he finally stopped once again and opened the window. This is the point where the dynamics of our interaction shifted indefinitely. Ivan had stopped crying. His tears had now been replaced with a look of complete and utter insanity. "God came to me last night in my dreams," he began. "He told me that you will be my wife. He told me you are my wife." A sickening smile crept over his face as my stomach literally dropped to the fucking ground. "You are my wife," he stated again. "You are my wife, and you will come with me. Now." At this, he began to lift himself onto the small ledge beneath the window in an attempt to lift himself into the stand. Realizing what he was doing, I quickly slammed the window shut, locking it. He pushed his weight back down off the ledge, paused, and then proceeded to give me a look that made me truly understand the meaning of having one's blood run cold. Before I continue any further, let me just say that until you personally experience a situation that demands you access your fight or flight response, you have no idea what that response is going to ultimately be. I don't care how tough you feel you are, the type of fear that's required to trigger this defense mechanism in the first place is more than most people ever realize, and how you will react to it will be involuntary. Until this point, I had always figured myself to be a fight type of person. I'm not. At all. And I came to learn that beyond any doubt on this day. By now I had dialed 911 and was frantically trying to relay as much information as possible to the operator while attempting to keep one eye on Ivan, who was now at the back door, attempting to figure out the numbered key code to release the electronic lock securing the door. As I spoke to the 911 operator, I could hear the faint beep, 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 beep of keys being punched on the electronic lock. Knowing that there would literally be a 1 in nearly infinite chance he'd managed to guess the 4-number code, I didn't feel too concerned with the thought of him gaining entry. That was until I felt my heart suddenly arrive at a complete stop in my chest, as I listened to the fateful sound of the keypad indicating a successful code entry, followed by the loud and heavy thunk of the steel deadbolt retreating quickly back into the door, unlocking it. In this moment, time stopped entirely. I no longer had a sense of it, or the space around me in which I currently occupied. As I turned, in what felt like slow motion, to face the door, just in time to see it began to be pushed open from the outside. I remember screaming involuntarily as I watched a rather large knife enter through the opening door first, followed by Ivan's firmly gripped hand around it. Remembering at this that Jonathan was still in his truck on the other side of the stand, I ran to the window and screamed desperately through the now closed and locked panel of glass, "Jonathan, he's got a fucking knife!" Jonathan's eyes grew huge, and he literally flew out of the driver's side of his truck towards the back door of the stand. I turned facing the back door, just in time to see Ivan step into the stand, a mere 10 feet from where I stood. For the rest of my life I will never, ever forget the look he had on his face as his eyes met mine. It was clear he knew that I was now helplessly aware of the reality of my situation. He looked intoxicated with the power he knew he held over me in this moment. I have never felt so much hate come from one person before. Until now I had hoped this type of evil, as pure as it revealed itself to be before me now, existed only in places far removed from the world I moved within. I had hoped that I would be lucky enough to never encounter it, as I harbored no desire whatsoever to make its acquaintance. Ivan took a total of 2 steps toward me before I saw an arm being thrown violently around his neck from behind. As I stood there in a state of paralysis due to fear, I watched as Jonathan pulled Ivan back by the neck. With so much force, his feet flew out from beneath him. Suddenly, both Ivan and Jonathan were on the ground right outside the door, with Jonathan securing Ivan in a nearly impossible headlock to break away from. He was yelling at him, strict instructions not to move, not a single muscle, or he would choke the fucking life out of him. Surprisingly, Ivan remained completely still, never once making any signs of resistance. Jonathan kicked the knife away from his reach and told me to pick it up and secure it until the cops arrive. Upon hearing this, I finally remembered I was still on the phone with 911, who had heard what was happening on my end, and dispatched every available unit within a 30-mile radius to my location, making my call in their response system as the highest priority. It felt like hours before the cops arrived, but once I had a chance to look back on the duration of my call to 911, I realized it had been a mere 4 minutes before over 30 local city, county, and state patrol units overtook the area. To this day, I have never seen so many cops respond to a single call before. At least 6 cops descending on Ivan at once, relieving the grip Jonathan had been holding around his neck, and forcibly, more than necessary, to my silent pleasure, detaining Ivan and carrying him, practically hogtied, to a waiting cruiser. Apparently, while speaking with the cops, after being securely restrained and unable to flee, Ivan insisted continually that I was his wife. God had told him, after all, that I was intended for him. I belonged to him, God said. He was simply there that morning to collect that which he had been promised. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories, episode 55. Before I go on, of course, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody who sent stories in and allowed me to use them in this video. If you have a story yourself, then please do send it to kingofthecities@gmail.com and or googlemail.com. Either way, it'll get to me. And the only thing I ask is that you, if you're very young, just get permission from your parent or guardian. But if you're over 16, just send it in. That's fine. I'll take most stories. There's certain subjects I prefer not to do. I prefer not to do something involving child molestation or rape, or rather, if it's in too graphic detail, it's going to be quite difficult for me to get through. Yeah. Now, I know I threw a couple of glitch stories in there. I won't be making a habit of that, but I thought those two would fit quite nicely in the video. Is that people being arseholes outside again? Yes, whatever. But yeah, I won't be making a habit of glitch stories in these videos, but I thought those ones were more creepy enough to be included in a scary stories video. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.